So this represents a place of an end, but it also represents a place of a beginning. That beginning is told about in the book of 1 Kings, from 1 Kings 19. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he replied, "I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword, and I am the only one left." I'm sorry, I'm a page past it. So let me go to the beginning of this. When Elijah first talks to Obadiah in 1 Kings 18. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals." So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," he replied. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." "What have I done wrong," asked Obadiah, "that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here?' I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here.' He will kill me." Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" I want to pause there for a minute because I want you to ponder those words. Here is someone going out killing the prophets of Israel because of his wife, who fears and wants to control and wants everyone to bow down and worship the gods that she serves. And yet here the one who is persecuting the prophets of God looks at the prophet of God and calls him the troubler of Israel. I will tell you that most people that accuse you of something more often are revealing to you who they themselves are and what they themselves have been doing. And when an accusation comes out of nowhere and you're stunned by it, I want you to think back on this verse, because here is King Ahab looking at one of God's messengers, one of God's chosen to reveal the Lord to the people in a pagan land, those who had broken their covenant of faith with God and worshipped along with the prophets of Baal. And he calls him the troubler of Israel. This is that origin of the pot calling the kettle black. This is the place in which that began. So is that you, you troubler of Israel? I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family, you have. You abandoned the Lord's commands and now follow the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. Where are you standing? Okay. This is not the traditional place. This is not the rumored place. This is not the buy the ticket and George Washington slept here place. You're standing and you look around at the high point, the high place of Mount Carmel. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring me the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one left of the Lord's prophets, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "O Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no answer. No response. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob. As we saw the 12 stones there in the synagogue, in the sanctuary, in the place of assembly at Kehilat HaCarmel, where we worshiped this morning, the 12 stones from Mount Carmel. So he said, take those 12 stones. One for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God! The Lord, he is God!" Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had brought them down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered them. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowed down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the sea," he said to his servant, and he went up and looked. "There is nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile the sky grew black with clouds, but the wind rose. A heavy rain came on, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came upon Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab, and all the way to Jezreel. You know the rest of the story. You know that Elijah believed that he was the last of the prophets, even though Obadiah told him that he had hid 100. And as Elijah went to flee by himself because he had accomplished what he had been set out to do, he found himself alone, crying out to God that I am the last of your prophets and they're trying to kill me too. And God said, I've reserved for myself a remnant. How many remember how many? The remnant was how many?
400? Yeah.
500.
Well, I guess you're going to have to read your Bibles tonight. You're going to have to look up the number he reserved for himself.
3,000.
And the Lord told him, how many?
3,000.
3,000.
Boom.
Okay? 3,000 God had reserved. And he told him. God spoke to Elijah and said, what are you doing here? And Elijah laments. Even after this incredible victory over the prophets of Baal, he laments. And God speaks to him and tells him that in your search for me, you're not going to find me in the thunder. You're not going to find me in the storm. You're not going to find me in the earthquake. You're going to find me in the still, small voice. 2 days ago was Shavuot, Pentecost, a celebration of the day that still small voice was made available to everyone for the asking. Who was the first to ask for the Spirit of God to be available to everyone? It was Moses. Moses cried out to God and said he wished that all of Israel were prophets and that the Spirit would be available to everyone. Moses was the first to ask that of God. God revealed to Elijah how. Jesus revealed to us when and in what form the Spirit of God would be available. And so on that day, 50 days after the resurrection, which also was exactly 50 days from the Exodus, they are the same day in the Bible. 50 days after the Exodus, the law was given. 50 days after the resurrection, the Spirit was given. 50 days after the law was given, 3,000 died. 50 days after the Spirit was given, 3,000 were saved. God had promised that he wasn't going to write a law on the tablets of stone as he did 50 days after the Exodus. He was going to write his law in our hearts and our minds, and he would give us that Spirit on the same day, 50 days after the resurrection. Tonight, when you look at Leviticus 23, and you see the feast of the Lord, 50 days, 7 weeks, 49, plus 1 day is 50. That's the Feast of Weeks, celebrated in a very important way. It was one of the appointed feasts of the Lord that you made pilgrimage to Israel. There were 3. Passover, the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, and then in the spring, in the fall, the Feast of Tabernacles. That will all be renewed again at the return of Messiah during the millennial reign. All of this connected to a big portion of the message of Pentecost because of what happened here. And because of God tearing down the altars by making his presence known. And the cry that, Lord, may your name be known throughout all of Israel. That each one of us now can call upon the Lord. And as Vladimir said today, you ask for a touch, but a touch for what? You ask for a word, but a word for what answer, for what question? You want an answer, but what's the question? You want the presence of the Lord, but for what purpose? And each one of us should listen to that message given on Shabbat and think about what was done in this place when Elijah asked the question. Make yourself known. Come down and make yourself known. And God's fire fell from heaven, consumed the offering, the altar, the water, to tear down the belief in the prophets of Baal. Nations can become saved. Nineveh was saved because of what God did. The prophets of Baal, the altar was destroyed, and they cried out, "The Lord, He is God." This is that place. And God uses this place as a memorial of His presence being made known. And as you look out at this place of assembly, where the armies of the Antichrist meet together, and you look at the hills, because that's where the battles will be fought, on the hills, you begin to realize that all this is interconnected to the same place and the same time. Because today the world is worshiping the prophets of Baal. The prophets of Baal, wherever we see these Asherah poles, wherever we see these obelisks, wherever we find religious spirits, we find exactly what surrounded the prophets of Baal: sexual sin. So the most religious are usually the ones that have the most sexual problems. Look at the Catholic Church and the problem with priests and young boys. Look at the more religious, the more sexual sin. This was always tied to these prophets. And so we have to be careful ourselves as to who we follow and what we follow. But remember that the entire Word of God is interconnected. And this place is connected to the beginning, to the middle, and to the end. And what God did here was the beginning of a revelation to the world that will culminate in this valley. It's an important place, beyond anyone's imagination, how large the scope of this is, and how many will assemble in this valley. When we think of the proportions of a 200 million man army, the amount of demons, the amount of fallen angels, the amount that will gather here, plus those that pledge their allegiance and carry the mark of the beast. But yet, they will be defeated. And again, in this place, the people will cry out, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God."
People all rise and face your flag.
For the
Yerushalayim. You know, many of you realize that this trip is the 10th anniversary of me taking groups from Birmingham. I came to Birmingham in February of 2007, and as a way to unify a city that was divided by denominations, that had no ecumenical presence across churches, across synagogues. I began two things to do in Birmingham when I came there, aside from planting the congregation, was to establish the first community Passover Seder and an annual trip to Israel, represented by people from every denomination, every church, every group. You didn't have to be a member of anyone or anywhere to make these trips with me. And it became an annual event by popular demand. More and more people said, we want to go, we want to go. So as our congregation expanded, first it started out as a congregational group, then it became a community group. Now it's statewide. We have 3 families from Louisiana with us. We have one from Ohio with us on this trip, and it continues to grow. The 2018 trip is already sold out. The 2019 trip is over halfway sold out. One of the commitments that we made in the vision to plant a new work in Birmingham and bring a new teaching to Alabama was to educate you about ministry of life-changing proportion. And it's not that work in Guatemala or work in Tanzania or work in Mexico is not important. But to me and to my people, the gospel being preached in Israel is my heart. And to reach the people of Israel is like plowing concrete. And there are those who have dedicated their lives, who have become vocal, who have become leaders, who have stood out, like Peter Tsudakara and his wife Rita, like Karen Davis, who led praise and worship today, 2 weeks after the passing of her husband, who was there to praise and worship the Lord 2 weeks after losing her husband. And so for the several months leading up to each one of these trips, I raise funds that are designated 100% for Israel work. Israel work to me is not feeding everybody. Israel work to me is not housing everybody. Israel work to me is those who commit themselves to reach the lost sheep of the house of Israel, whether or not it's through food, or it's through congregations, or it's through humanitarian aid, or in the case of my friend Danny Carmel, who, as a Jewish believer, committed himself to, as a captain here on the Galilee, who came to faith and said, now that I serve the Lord, I was a fisher of fish, a fisherman of fish, and I will become and commit my life to become a fisher of men. And so, you're on the faith boat. And it's been Danny's dream and vision to have 3 boats. What do you think they would be called? Faith?
Hope we already have.
Hope we already have. So the 3rd one, the love boat.
It would be the greatest of all.
And so you may look at this and you say, well, this is a tour boat on the Galilee. No, my friends, this is a pulpit of magnificent proportion, of a Jewish man who came to faith and did not deny his faith by becoming somebody he was not, but by becoming more full in the fullness of who God made him, to continue as a captain of a ship, that everyone who sits on board knows that he is a believer in Yeshua as a Messiah, And so I've just presented him with one of the checks that we brought as part of the seed money for the Love Boat. We take none of our friendships for granted. People come and go in your life, but those who stand beside you when you're of small beginnings or when you have a worldwide television show, it doesn't matter. The people you start out with are the people you want to finish with. They're the ones that you know from the very beginning, from day one, who welcomed you in love when they didn't know your name. They never saw your face before. Here it is 10 years later, and my arms are wrapped around a man I call my brother. A man that I love, and I want to encourage you to love as well. That this is a ministry different than all the other ministries across Israel. Because groups from all over the world catch the vision right here on this boat, and they take it home with them. And they take the music home with them. And they take the memory home with them. And the reason why you're 60 sitting here is because somebody told you, you need to come to Israel. It'll change your life. And when you go back to your community and you have an answer for your Jewish friend or your Jewish neighbor or for your pastor that never saw the Bible through Jewish eyes before, who comes along, and we have 4 pastors on this trip. You look around you, you don't know who the pastors are because they're no different, nor should they be or should we be any different than all of you. We are children of the same King, children of the same God. But this is a man who will go to every length. It is Shabbat, my friends. And he is a man who is taking us here out on Shabbat. And has a story to share with you. But I want you to know you've been a part of his life for all these 10 years. And each year in your way, for those of you who know me since the beginning, you have planted into this work. And so I told you would meet each one along the way who have been a part of the growth of the ministry that God has blessed me with in Alabama, and to bring the word and to bring people to Israel, that brought Edo into my life, that brought Moshe into my life, that brought all of you into my life, that brought Danny Carmel into my life. So God bless you, my friend.
Should I say, thank you for trusting God and coming to Israel? I'm saying that because people in America trust in CNN, trust in God. So you tell your friends at home, no more fake news. Come to Israel, bless Israel. Well, as you know, my name is Daniel Carmel, and I'm a Jewish believer in Yeshua HaMashiach. And I came to faith and believe during my work as a boat captain. And now I really will tell you my whole life story, but then we'll be late for breakfast tomorrow. But anyway, I will share just a little bit. I'll try to do it in just a few minutes. So I came over to Melody to look for my birth mother. I met my birth mother for the first time at the age of 48. As a doctor, with the best adoptive parents on earth. I was raised from the 7th day because they got me when I was 7 days old. And I like the number. And at the age of 28, when I opened the fast of the adoption, I found my mother right here in Galilee. And also I found 4 brothers and sisters. And the year after I found them, I left France and I came over here to the farm. That's exactly where you're talking about. My grandma was a actually started translating very popular worship songs to Hebrew and also writing new songs. And why Hebrew? Because Hebrew is his language. Also, I believe that we all, when we go to be, will have to speak Hebrew. So if you don't know Hebrew, you better start learning it here. And he says, America, ASAP. And at the beginning, the people that I was writing for then, I wasn't employed. They were very happy with it. Wow, we have a believer on the boat. He's sharing his faith with our clients. He's worshiping with our clients. This is great for business. But eventually, many people that used to book only a boat started to book a boat, and now they want an island on the boat. So the people I was working for, they said, okay, we have one Daniel and 6 boats. It's not so good for us. Let's let Daniel go. And that's what I did. And the first 3 days when it happened to me, I just requested, and it never happened to me. And I prayed, and I asked Yeshua why. And 3 days after that, I received a phone call from the pastor with the answer. And he said, you know, Daniel, we just discovered that we are not on the boat anymore, so we're going to take a miracle at the hotel. You come over there, we worship there. So I came over, and the word came out, and slowly but surely I started receiving bookings to big groups every night at different hotel for a long, long time. And then people started asking me to come overseas. And until today I'm traveling all over the world to sing in churches, to worship. I've been many, many times to America. Alabama, Texas, where else? Louisiana. I didn't get to Ohio yet. Where is it? Then, 2007, I came back from America from Washington. Went to meet one of my friends here in the Sea of Galilee. And this guy, he lives on the Sea of Galilee. He's got his own boats. Not the same kind of boats. He's got these white boats. They do boom, boom, boom in the middle of the night. You know, do you stay in Tiberias? Where do you stay? Is it in Tiberias? You don't hear this boat there in the middle of the night. They boom, boom, boom. They stop. It's good that you don't hear that. But anyway, he's the owner of this boat. But until the year 2000, he used to work with one boats. And so when I came to see him in 2007, I saw this boat in his marina. And this was one of the leftovers. And this one was not in a good shape. 7 years nobody worked with it, nobody touched it. And anyway, I asked him if he wants to sell it. So he said, no, he cannot sell it. It's a just for the city. He said, after 10 years, we take it out of the bank, why not make it to Tiberias? And I told him, I think it's a waste. And I told him, you know, don't just give it away because we will let you have it. So he said, you know, Daniel, maybe we could think about it. So he went for a week of thinking about it, and I went for a week of praying about it. And a week after that, I met him. And he said, you know, Daniel, I'm going to look as well as a gift, so I'll give it as a gift, to you. And if you want to pay any money, you can buy the boat. So I bought the boat. Still have it, a very good carabiner, very good. Yes. It took me after that 8 months with the big crew of carpenters to make this boat seaworthy again. Today I have 2 boats, the Faith boat and the Hope boat, and it's a young family with that boat. And there's a long story after that, but I don't want to take so much time. Today I'm going to say I came over to Galilee to look for my mother, and I found my father. Amen? Hallelujah. Let's sing a song or two together. I'm going to sing part in English. Just join me. You know, actually I'll sing even more English and you can join me and sing. Alright? Sing Praise the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. worship your holy name. Sunrise with you day dawn. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Sing it out, people. Bless the Lord. Sing, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I worship your holy name. You're rich, you are, and slow to anger. Your name is great, and your heart is kind. For all your goodness, I will keep on singing. 1,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, sing, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I worship your holy name. Just a little bit of Hebrew now. חדש שווה הפציע, זה הזמן לשיר את שירך, כל מה שהיה וכל מה Praise the Lord, sing praise the Lord, my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship before, oh my soul, I worship your holy name. I worship your holy. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. My chains are gone. I've been set free. Let me sing it out for you. I got my Savior. My first belief. Praise God, sing it out. Praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God. Sing praise God. Hallelujah, amen.
shots here.
No! Before the week is over, I'm going to teach you all how to do OHIL.
It's not just about, I would say, where the tribes lived before. It's about water. And that's one of the reasons we are walking through this area. Number two, I'm going to take you also to a site where it's the oldest archaeological find in the Middle East. I would say, I wouldn't exaggerate if I was saying the word, because it goes back all the way to Abraham. Abraham. And there, I'd like to open the Bible and show you where a couple verses that refer to that site. And you're going to find out that when we'll open the Bible, it will be the 10 first pages of the Bible, and the rest of the Bible follows. Meaning what you're going to see there later on toward the end of our track goes back before the pyramids, goes back before, I would say, any of the main events that you know of the scriptures. Goes back to the beginning of civilization. And that's another one of the signs.
Who needed headphones?
Who needed headphones? The one that had a problem with? Rabbi, can we start?
We can.
Okay. Family, we got the green light. We walk. And then when you go down about 100 miles to the south, that river becomes a major, huge river. Well, that's not the case with the Jordan River. You'll find out, folks, it's quite a narrow river. But, folks, let me tell you one thing about the Jordan River. It's got no doubt a beautiful, outstanding PR in the scriptures, but it's narrow, okay? And especially the place where you're going to be baptized, and Rabbi Eric will be talking about that soon, and telling you about the fact that you'll be able, if you want to, be baptized out of the Jordan River. But do not expect to see the Mississippi. It's not going to be wider than what you see over here. You say, what? Yes. But that's the beauty about it. Because whatever you imagine up to now, reality is going to hit you. Mountains in your so-called kind of American measures and so on, over here in Israel, okay? You look at them, you say, well, it's not more than a hill. But for us, those are mountains. Rivers, wide. For us, this is the beginning of the source of life in this country. And that is the Dan Springs. We walk. Okay, folks, a bit about the wildlife over here. And I was talking with a couple of members of the group about future wildlife that you'll find here. But let me try to revive a few of those. Jackals. We have quite a number of those. Kind of fading out. Look at that, folks. Wild pigs, boars. In Israel, and especially up north, those are the size of a donkey. Huge. Why is that? Because no one hunts them. No one hunts them. A, hunting is against the law. B, pigs, you remember?
Yeah.
Those are short wild cows, okay? Nobody eats them. And they get to a size of a little truck. I mean it. And when you encounter of those boars, better give him the way, or her. Then, folks, you've got a lutra, and you find those just by the river, okay? And that's the lutra over here. It's a kind of a beaver without the tail of a beaver. And something else that is cute, oh cute, that you want to pet. But, ladies and gentlemen, you don't even think about touching it. And that is that lizard with yellow points, known by the name the salamandra. It's got a system to defend itself by sweating through those yellow pores some really, I would say, a kind of a sweat that is deadly. In the past, they were collecting that sweat and dipping it of arrows in it and so on. So when you see that type of salamandra, look at it, take a picture of it, folks. But hey, with all the animal lovers that are here, let it be. Please, let it be. So that's some of the wildlife you'll find over here. There's another one that is not mentioned, that you find here and also to the southern part of the country, mentioned in the Bible, okay? And there's a gentleman that did a research about them over here. Where are you, buddy? Where are you, buddy? The one? Okay. And found, and it is true, that they are mentioned in the Bible, Cody, Coney, a rock badger, and there you'll find them on stone and rocks sunbathing. They love this weather, they come out, they live in large communities and so on. If you want to feed them here, you'll find them all the way down south by the Engedi Desert and Masada. So folks, we walk. After sitting on the bus yesterday for hours, it's about time that you'll take a hike. And if there's a choice between the short one and the long one, I'll take the long one. And this is where I'll try and even, okay, your journey yesterday on the bus and your hike today. This way to the left says long trail, short trail. Short trail goes straight up, long trail go left. And we're taking left. From this point and on, it's getting to be uneven. And some of the stones are slippery. Look carefully what you're stepping on, okay? And take it easy. We are not in a rush. And please help each other, okay, as we walk.
You know, my son just did
The Apaches.
no, he lives up there. He does Appalachia, but the Pacific Crest Trail goes from Mexico up the west coast, Canada.
He did all of it? Woo!
6 months.
Wow. Remaining of ancient civilizations. It doesn't look like it, but there was over here a 1600 years old canal that was diverting the water from the mainstream into some of the residential areas. And that's what it says, a Byzantine, 4th century AD. canal. You're going to find sinkholes, exits on the right hand side. Always remember the sound and the amount of water that you see over here, because in just a couple of days it's going to be desert. So listen to the sound of just bubbling kind of a little stream that starts over here. You're sitting on the heads of the largest caustic spring in the Middle East, 240 million cubic water a year. We are at the foot of the highest mountain in Israel. 1/3 of that mountain is in the Israeli area, Israeli territory. It's Mount Hermon. Some would say that that is the Mount of the Transfiguration. I personally would lean toward that. Some others would say it's Mount Tabor that we saw yesterday. It snows up on top, a white cap. Maybe you see some white spots on it even today up on top. 9,321 feet above sea level, divided between 3 countries, Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. Anybody knows what's the difference between a caustic and an artesian spring? Okay. Caustic, constant flow. Artesian goes according to the amount of rain. It goes up and flows. No rain, no water, no flow. But as much, it's always stay in the same kind of I would say level, and as much as you scoop out of it, you'll have the same, okay? Because it's a kind of a martini cup that we're sitting on of an underground so-called aquifer. That is kind of a cement layer formed by nature that water cannot go through anymore. And what happens, it looks for a place to burst out. Wherever it bursts out, that is the spring. And this is where it bursts out. So here, this is one of those 3 tributaries that I mentioned, the Dan tributary. Trees above you folks, fig trees. You see that? And you can see some of those figs. Anybody knows what the difference of the way that a fig tree grows and any other tree we know? Say that again.
Goes out, not up.
I can't hear you. Again, ma'am?
It grows out, no, and not straight up.
Yeah, but there are many other trees that grows up and not straight up.
Okay.
That's okay. Good try. And go on. Keep on trying, folks.
Okay.
Because eventually you get it right and it's okay. Honestly, it's okay, darling. I want you to kind of share and folks be different. And I'll take all trees except the fig tree, and nothing to do with the scriptures. Trunk, branches, leaves, flowers, fruits. That's the order. But a fig tree, trunk, branches, fruits, and leaves. If you came here about a month ago, no leaves, looks like this tree have a certain disease of bumps on it, those are those little figs that you see. And that's the difference between the fig tree and any other tree that we know of in nature.
And I should have known that because I have a fig tree and I watch it grow.
Do the leaves
Don't make it worse. I get myself into a corner, darling, so hey. But that's good. Thanks for sharing. Yes, love.
Did you say the leaves grow after the fruit?
Yes, the leaves go after the
They grow
truth.
to protect the fruit? Is that what it is?
You're taking it too far. I really don't know why.
But
There's a logic in what you say.
the leaves grow to
There's a logic in what you say. I don't know eventually the reason and natural way that the fig tree grows, but it's a fact. First comes the fruits and then comes the leaves. And it could be as a protection to the fruit. I'll take my word, the birds know how to get to those fruits with leaves or without. So, dear friends, it's a natural reserve. We found out, and I'll make it short for those of us baking in the sun, that civilization by a spring lived longer than civilizations in the cities. Why is that? Resources, water resources, fresh water, pure water, clean water. In the cities, water cisterns, collected rainwater, and the water stands there for a week, for a month, for I would say a year, and you can imagine what happens. What was the main, after I share with you that, what was the main reason of death 2,000 and 3,000 years ago? Abdominal diseases. Anybody read a description of the death of Herod, King Herod the Great? Worms coming out? Okay. Herod lived in a city, okay? And as much he had an access to the water, spring water, they were not aware of those kind of bacteria that and develop in the water, in still water. And that was the main reason of death. And we found out, following kind of opening some graves and checking the skeletons and so on, that average of it was about 35, 40, you're already old, okay, in the city. But outside, folks, you can go easily to 50 and even 60 years of age. And that was, wow, that you're really old and so on. So, yes, this area, folks, as this natural reserve took over, by remainings of walls and canals you walk through, you saw Byzantine Canal from the 4th century AD, 1600 years ago, the civilization have developed over here. As that it developed, so was so-called the, let's say, religion, tradition, that we're going to find out in about 5 minutes as we walk to the high spot in this whole natural reserve, where we'll find a bema, a high place of sacrifice, and a remaining of an altar that looked like the one that was standing in the second temple.